Hello, and welcome. Find a place of quiet and let the noise of your world fall away. Tonight, our journey takes us north, far north, to a place of immense silence and blinding white, a place that holds one of the greatest and most poignant mysteries in the history of exploration. In the year 1845, two ships, HMs Erebus and Terror, sailed from England under the command of Sir John Franklin. They were the pinnacle of naval technology, their hulls reinforced to withstand the ice, their larders stocked for 3 years, their crews the very best the Royal Navy had to offer. Their mission was to finally conquer the last great challenge of the Arctic, the charting of the Northwest Passage. They sailed into the labyrinth of the Canadian archipelago, into the white emptiness, and vanished. But tonight, we are not here to solve a mystery or to dwell on the tragedy that we know now followed. The story of survival and loss is a loud one. Our purpose is quieter. We are here to join the men of the Franklin expedition in the time before the end. We are here to join them in the waiting. We will step aboard their floating wooden worlds and experience the long, slow, and monotonous months when they were locked fast in the ice, a small bubble of order and routine in a vast, timeless, and silent landscape. Our small company of quiet explorers makes these journeys into these forgotten places together. If you wish to be counted among the crew for future voyages, a quiet subscription is all that is required. The comments below are our ship's log, where you are always welcome to leave a quiet entry, perhaps of where you are on your own journey tonight. Now, let us travel back in time to the last known sighting and step aboard. Our story begins not in the crushing ice of the high Arctic, but in a place of relative comfort and community. It is late July 1845 in the Disko Bay of Greenland. This is the last outpost of the European world, a seasonal haven for the whaling ships that hunt these cold, rich waters. It is here that the Franklin expedition made its final planned stop. The mood is one of quiet confidence and industry. For a few days, the two naval ships are a hub of activity. They are taking on their final provisions from their attendant supply ship. Barrels of salted beef, sacks of flour, and, most importantly, live cattle to provide a last taste of fresh meat before the long journey into the ice. The men of the expedition are in high spirits. They are the best of the best on the best equipped ships ever to attempt the passage. Their commander, Sir John Franklin, is a seasoned, if aging, veteran of the Arctic. The ship's libraries are stocked with thousands of books. They even have a hand-cranked organ for Sunday service and musical evenings. To them, the challenges ahead are difficult, but entirely surmountable. This is not a desperate gamble. It is a scientific and naval undertaking of the highest order. In these final days of contact, the men write their last letters home. These are not letters of fear or foreboding. They are full of a cheerful, almost domestic optimism. An officer writes to his sister, assuring her that they are full of hope and confidence. Another describes the strange, beautiful sight of the midnight sun. A young, able seaman asks his parents to look after his affairs, but writes of his excitement for the adventure ahead. They write of their good health, of the quality of the food, of their complete faith in their ships and their commander. These letters, placed in a canvas bag, are the last testament of the living crew. They are the final words these men will ever send to the world they are leaving behind. The whalers who meet them are deeply impressed. They describe the ships as being in perfect order, the officers as confident and in high spirits, and the crews as all well and cheerful. The final resupply is complete. The letters have been handed over. The last bullock has been brought aboard. Then comes the moment of departure. A quiet signal is given. The anchors are weighed, with the crews of the whaling ships giving them 3 hearty cheers. The Erebus and the Terror slowly and majestically catch the Arctic wind in their sails. They navigate through the channels of scattered icebergs, their black hulls and tall masts a stark and beautiful contrast to the white and blue of the landscape. They sail north into Baffin Bay, towards the unknown entrance to the passage. Aware, watching them go, makes the last known recorded sighting of the expedition. He sees them sailing with purpose into the ice. Then they disappear from view and are never seen by European eyes again. The Erebus and the Terror were not ordinary naval vessels. They were bomb ships, a specific and exceptionally sturdy class of warship designed to withstand the violent, repeated recoil of heavy mortar. Their hulls were built with a double planking of thick English oak, a wooden frame of immense strength and solidity. For their Arctic mission, they were made stronger still. Great sheets of iron were bolted to their bows, turning them into armored battering rams designed to push and break through the sea ice. They were the most powerful ice-faring vessels of their time, but their strength was not just in their hulls. They were vessels that bridged the old world of sail and the new world of steam. From a distance, they looked like classic sailing ships, with 3 tall masts and a complex, beautiful web of rigging, spars, and ropes, all tarred a deep, functional black. This was their primary and most reliable source of power. But hidden in the heart of each ship was a secret weapon, a piece of the Industrial Revolution carried into the pristine wilderness. A converted railway steam locomotive engine connected to a single bronze screw propeller that could be raised and lowered through a well in the stern. This engine was not powerful enough to drive the ship at great speed, but it gave the captain a crucial advantage: the ability to maneuver with precision through narrow, ice-choked channels, even without wind. Let us step aboard. The main deck is a world of ordered complexity. The wooden planks are scrubbed white, the ropes are coiled with geometric precision. The massive wooden masts tower above us, and the intricate network of rigging creates a beautiful, symmetrical pattern against the pale Arctic sky. The air smells of tar, of salt, of cold, clean wood. Brass fittings like the ship's bell and the binnacle containing the compass are polished to a brilliant mirror shine, a small point of defiant, civilized gleam in the vast, wild landscape. We move from the open deck down a narrow companionway and enter the world below. First, we visit the great cabin at the stern, the domain of Sir John Franklin. This is the intellectual and emotional heart of the expedition. It is a surprisingly comfortable space, paneled in dark, polished wood. A large stern window lets in the low Arctic light. There are bookshelves built into the very structure of the ship, filled with a magnificent library of over 1,200 volumes. Here are classic works of literature, histories, travelogues, scientific texts, and religious books. This library was not a luxury. It was an essential tool for maintaining the morale and the intellectual life of the officers during the long, dark winter ahead. On a large table, nautical charts are spread out, weighted down with brass instruments, a sextant, a chronometer, a set of drawing compasses. This is the ship's brain, a warm, orderly, and deeply British space. But this relative comfort was reserved for a select few. We move forward into the deeper, darker parts of the ship and descend to the lower deck, the world of the common sailor. The change is immediate. The ceilings are much lower, crisscrossed with massive wooden beams. The space is cramped, a crowded world of wood and men. Here, the sailors slept in hammocks, slung in tight rows, which would be taken down each morning to make way for the long wooden tables where they ate their meals. The only light comes from the thick green glass of small deck prisms or the smoky glow of whale oil lamps. The air is thick with the smell of dozens of men living in close quarters, mixed with the smell of boiled salt beef and pea soup from the nearby galley. Yet, even here, the order of the Royal Navy prevails. The space is clean, the hammocks are neatly stowed, and there is a sense of a disciplined, functional community. Deeper still, in the hold of the ship, lies its promise of survival, the larder. Here, in the coldest part of the vessel, are the provisions, intended to last for 3 full years. Barrels of salt beef and pork, sacks of flour, and crates of lemon juice to ward off the dreaded disease of scurvy. But most impressively, there are over 8,000 tins of preserved foods. A new and revolutionary technology. Tins of preserved meats, of hearty soups, of minced beef and gravy, and of vegetables. This was the great hope. The belief that technology and careful planning could conquer the harshest environment on Earth. The entire ship, from its iron-plated bow to its well-stocked larder, was a perfect self-contained floating piece of Victorian England. It carried not just men and supplies, but an entire worldview of order, confidence, and faith in technology as it sailed quietly into the vast, silent, and indifferent world of the ice. After a successful summer of navigating the channels of the archipelago, the Arctic autumn begins to assert itself. The days grow noticeably shorter. A new, sharp, unforgiving bite appears in the wind, and the very sea itself begins to change its nature. The open water, once a deep, dark blue, becomes dull and leaden. A greasy, slushy texture appears on the surface. Then small, circular plates of ice begin to form, jostling against each other in the gentle swell. The sailors called it pancake ice. This is the first sign that the sea is beginning to freeze. Sir John Franklin, following the established practice of Arctic explorers, knew that to be caught in the open sea when the final freeze came was to risk the ships being crushed by the immense pressure of the pack ice. A safe, sheltered harbor had to be found to spend the winter. He chose a location that was well protected on the southwestern coast of Beechy Island. Here, the 2 ships, Erebus and Terror, dropped their anchors for the last time that year and waited for the ice to take them. The final freeze is not a sudden, dramatic event. It is a slow, quiet, and inexorable process. The pancake ice thickens, the individual plates freezing together to form great, solid flows. The channels of open water shrink until finally one morning, the men awaken to a world of absolute stillness. The sea is gone. In its place is a single, unbroken, flat plain of solid, white ice, stretching for miles in every direction. The ships, which for so long had been a symbol of movement, are now held fast. They are no longer ships, but buildings. They have become part of the landscape. Now the methodical and well-practiced routine of wintering in begins. This is not a time of panic, but of intense, purposeful labor, designed to turn the ships into warm, habitable, and defensible fortresses against the coming cold and darkness. The topmasts and rigging are taken down, reducing the profile of the ships to the howling winter gales. The rudders are unshipped from their sterns and stored on the ice to protect them from being damaged by the shifting pack. A thick canvas roof is erected over the main deck from the bow to the stern. This creates a covered, enclosed space, a sort of attic or conservatory, which adds another layer of insulation and provides a place for the men to work and exercise out of the wind. Then the most important task of all, the banking of the ships. The crew, armed with saws and shovels, cut great blocks of snow and ice from the surrounding floe and build them up against the hulls of the ships, creating thick, insulating walls that reach almost to the level of the deck. This snow wall will protect the wooden timbers from the full, devastating force of the Arctic cold. Life settles into a new, static routine. A scientific observatory is established on the shore, where the officers conduct their daily readings. Hunting parties are sent out in search of caribou and polar bears to supplement the tinned provisions with fresh meat. A great pile of empty food tins grows on the shore, a small monument to their first winter of consumption. But the winter is not without its hardships. The cold is relentless, and the darkness is absolute. And despite the good provisions, the human body is fragile. During that first planned winter, 3 men of the crew died from illness, most likely tuberculosis. Their comrades buried them with full naval honors on the frozen shore of Beechy Island, carving simple wooden headboards to mark their graves. It was a somber, orderly, and tragic reminder of the fragility of life in this beautiful but unforgiving land. As the months of darkness wore on, the two ships sat, silent and still, banked in their walls of snow, a small, brave outpost of human order in the vast, empty silence of the long Arctic night. The last sliver of the sun dips below the southern horizon in early November and does not return. The world is now plunged into the profound, unbroken darkness of the polar night. For months, there will be no sunrise, no sunset, no daytime. There will be only the varying shades of darkness, the deep, velvety black of a moonless night, and the pale, ghostly, blue-gray twilight when the full moon hangs in the sky, its light reflecting off the endless plain of ice. In this timeless, featureless landscape, how does a man measure his existence? How does he know when to wake, when to work, when to eat, when to sleep? For the 129 men of the Franklin expedition, the answer was simple and absolute. They did not live by the sun, they lived by the bell. The entire structure of their lives, the very rhythm of their breathing, was governed by the rigid, unwavering discipline of Royal Navy time. On the deck of the flagship, HMS Erebus, the ship's bow, made of polished brass, was the true sun. Its chiming was the only clock that mattered. Imagine the sound. In the absolute, profound silence of the Arctic, where the cold air suppresses all distant noise, the ring of the ship's bell would be an event of incredible clarity and power. A sharp, pure, metallic note that would shatter the silence for a moment, echoing for miles across the frozen sea before being swallowed again by the immense quiet. This bell marked the passage of the watches. Life was divided into 4-hour segments. At the end of each watch, the bell would be struck 8 times. A new set of men would emerge from the warmth of the lower decks, bundled in their heavy winter gear, their breath pluming in the frigid air to relieve the men on deck. This simple, repeating ritual was the engine that drove the day. Let us follow this artificial time. At 8 bells, marking noon, though the sky outside is black, the men on the mess decks are served their main meal of the day. They eat by the dim, warm, yellow light of whale oil lamps. The atmosphere is quiet, the conversation subdued. The meal, perhaps tinned meat and preserved vegetables, is a warm, welcome anchor in the middle of the dark, cold day. After the meal, duties are assigned. The world is a hive of quiet, purposeful activity, all contained within the wooden walls of the ships. One group of men might be tasked with the endless, essential work of chipping the thick, crystalline buildup of ice from the rigging and the ship's railings. Another might be sent to check the stores in the hold, their lanterns casting long, dancing shadows on the barrels and crates. Another might be mending sails in the covered space on the upper deck, the rhythmic push and pull of the needle through the heavy canvas a quiet, meditative task. The bell chimes again, marking the passage of another half hour. 4 bells. The afternoon watch continues. The work is slow, methodical, and designed as much to occupy the mind as it is to maintain the ship. The greatest enemy in the long darkness was not the cold, against which they had shelter, but the crushing, soul-devouring monotony. The rigid adherence to the timetable was the primary weapon in this silent psychological war. 8 bells sounds again, marking the end of another watch. The evening meal is served. The routine is unwavering, predictable. It is a powerful statement of human order imposed upon a world of timeless natural chaos. The chiming of the bell was a constant, reassuring reminder that even here, at the frozen top of the world, in the endless dark, they were not lost. They were sailors of the British Royal Navy, and the ship's time was the only time that mattered. The iron discipline of the naval routine provided the skeleton for their lives during the long winter. But a skeleton must be fleshed out with spirit, with creativity, and with community. Sir John Franklin and his officers understood that to survive the polar night, The men's minds, as well as their bodies, needed to be kept active and engaged. And so, the wooden world of the ships was transformed into a place of surprising culture and gentle diversion. Their most ambitious undertaking was the creation of the Royal Arctic Theater. A space on the lower deck would be cleared. A stage would be built. Backdrops were painted on old sails, depicting scenes of an English countryside or London street, a poignant and beautiful contrast to the reality outside. Costumes were stitched together from whatever materials could be found: old uniforms, blankets, the skins of hunted animals. By the warm, smoky, flickering light of the oil footlights, the men would perform plays. These were not grand tragedies, but simple popular comedies and melodramas of the day. It was a chance for the men to escape their roles, for a common sailor to become a king, or a stern marine to play a comical dame. The performances were a source of immense communal joy, a precious few hours where the crushing silence and darkness outside was replaced with laughter, with applause, and with the shared creative energy of a story being told. Education, too, became a vital part of the routine. Many of the common sailors of the era were illiterate. The officers, understanding the value of an occupied mind, set up a shipboard school. In the evenings, on the mess decks, classes would be held by lamplight. Imagine the scene. A young lieutenant, barely out of his teens, sitting patiently beside a rough, hardened sailor, guiding his finger along the words in a simple primer or a copy of the Bible. The quiet, careful sound of a man learning to form his letters on a slate board. For these men, the long Arctic night was an unexpected and profound opportunity. They were not just passing the time. They were gaining a skill that would change their lives, should they ever return home. The ship's magnificent library was the silent heart of this intellectual life. On the dark, cold evenings, the men who could read would lose themselves in its pages. They would journey to faraway lands in travelogues, laugh at the gentle satire of Dickens in the latest issue of Punch magazine, or find comfort and solace in a book of prayers. The library was a gateway, a portal out of the frozen, monotonous present, and into the vast, warm, and varied world of the human imagination. And then there were the simpler, quieter pleasures. The quiet clatter of a game of checkers on a wooden board, a game of cards played for matches or tobacco, and most evocatively, the sound of music. An officer might play a melancholy tune on his flute in the quiet of his cabin. Or, more often, a sailor would bring out a fiddle or a concertina, and a small group of men would gather, listening to the familiar, lively tunes of home. The sound of a simple, joyful jig, played on a lone fiddle, echoing out from the wooden ship and across the vast, silent, and utterly empty landscape of the frozen sea, was perhaps the most powerful act of defiance against the crushing silence of the polar night. The Franklin expedition was not just a quest for a geographical prize. It was a major scientific undertaking. The ships were packed with the most advanced scientific instruments of the day, and the officers were tasked with a comprehensive program of observation. This work, like the ship's routine, provided another vital anchor for the mind. It was a way to engage with the strange and hostile environment, not as a passive victim, but as an active, rational, and scientific observer. A short distance from the ships, a small observatory was constructed on the ice. Inside this shelter, safe from the worst of the wind, were the delicate instruments for measuring the unseen forces of the Arctic world. A key part of the expedition's mission was to conduct a year-long study of terrestrial magnetism. The North Magnetic Pole was known to be somewhere in this region, and the Royal Society in London wanted data. Imagine an officer, a young lieutenant perhaps, bundled in furs until only his eyes are visible, making his way from the warm ship to the cold observatory in the endless dark. His journey is lit only by the small, warm pool of light from his hooded lantern. Inside the observatory, he begins his meticulous, repetitive work. First, he consults the magnetometers. These were delicate instruments, often a magnetic needle suspended from a single strand of silk, which measured the direction and intensity of the Earth's magnetic field. He had to be incredibly careful, ensuring that no iron objects on his person, like a belt buckle or a pocket knife, would disturb the sensitive readings. He would hold his lantern close, read the precise angle of the needle, and record it, along with the exact time and a heavy leather-bound logbook. Next, the meteorological instruments. The brass barometer to measure the atmospheric pressure, and a whole suite of thermometers to record the air temperature with punishing accuracy. He would also use special thermometers, designed to be lowered into holes drilled deep into the sea ice, to measure the temperature gradient of the frozen world beneath his feet. Each reading was taken with the utmost care, a small, precise, and objective fact captured from the great chaotic wilderness. This work was not confined to the observatory. Geological parties would set out on the rare, clearer days to explore the stark, rocky shores of Beachy Island. They would walk the frozen beaches, their hammers clinking against the stones, collecting samples of the ancient rocks to be taken back to England for study. Naturalists would set traps, hoping to capture an Arctic fox or a lemming to be sketched and dissected, adding to the world's small but growing knowledge of these remote creatures. All of this data, every single temperature reading, every magnetic deviation, every small gray rock was meticulously recorded, labeled, and stored. The logbooks filled with page after page of neat, orderly columns of numbers. This was the slow, patient, and often tedious work of 19th century science. It was a quest to impose a rational, numerical order upon the world. For the officers of the expedition, this quiet, repetitive, and deeply focused work was a vital intellectual purpose. It was their own war against the monotony of the long night, a way of transforming their confinement from a simple physical endurance test into a meaningful contribution to human knowledge. With the ships banked in snow and the routine of the long night established, the world for the men of the expedition shrinks. But the environment outside their wooden walls is not dead, nor is it silent. The sea ice, the great frozen ocean that holds them captive, is a living, breathing entity. It has its own voice, its own moods, its own immense and terrifying power. To live on the ice for a year is to learn its language. The most profound and constant presence is the sound. In the deep, absolute quiet of the Arctic, where there are no trees for the wind to rustle, no distant animals to call, the sound of the ice is a living thing. It is a soundscape unlike any other on Earth. There is the deep, resonant groan of the main pack. This is the sound of millions of tons of ice, a single continent-sized sheet, shifting with the unseen pressures of wind and current hundreds of miles away. It is a sound that is felt as much as it is heard, a deep, vibrating hum that travels through the frozen water, up into the hull of the ship, and into the very bones of the men. It is the sound of immense, slow geological power. Then there is the sharp, violent crack, a sound like a cannon shot that echoes for miles across the flat expanse. This is the sound of a new fissure, a new lead of open water, being born as the immense tension in the ice is suddenly released. For the men in their hammocks below deck, this sound would be a sudden, sharp reminder of the immense forces that held their small wooden world in its grip. There is the high-pitched, almost musical grinding and squealing sound of two massive ice floes rubbing against each other. It is an alien and unsettling sound, the sound of a world in slow, constant, and powerful friction. And always there is the soft, dry hiss of the wind blowing fine, powdery snow across the surface of the pack, a whispering, sibilant sound that never truly ceases. The visual world of the ice is just as complex. From the ship's deck, it may look like a uniform white plain, but to walk upon it is to enter a strange and varied landscape. There are the vast, flat expanses of the main floe, their surfaces sculpted by the wind into long, low dunes of snow called sastrugi. And then there are the pressure ridges. These are miniature mountain ranges, sometimes rising 20 or 30 feet in the air, formed where two flows have collided. They are chaotic, impassable walls of jagged, angular blocks of ice, thrown up in a moment of immense, slow-motion violence. It is in these broken ridges that the true color of the ice is revealed. Not white, but a spectrum of breathtaking blues and greens. The older and more compressed the sea ice, the less air it contains, and the more it absorbs the red and yellow light, reflecting only the purest blues and greens. To look into the heart of a pressure ridge is to look into a cavern of sapphire and emerald, a display of cold, crystalline beauty. The men's relationship with this living, moving, and speaking landscape was one of deep and abiding respect. They learned to read its surfaces, to understand its sounds, to know when it was safe to travel and when they must remain within the safety of their wooden walls. The ice was their prison, but it was also their entire world, a place of strange, desolate, and profound beauty. In the profound, months-long darkness of the polar night, the world was a study in monochrome. The black of the sky, the white of the ice, the gray twilight of the moon. But on certain nights, when the conditions were right, the sky itself would offer a spectacle of such otherworldly beauty that it would draw every man onto the cold deck to watch in silent, humbled awe. This was the aurora borealis, the northern lights. It does not begin with a sudden flash. It starts as a faint, almost imperceptible glow on the horizon, a patch of the dark sky that seems strangely luminous, as if a distant green moon is about to rise. The men on watch, their eyes attuned to the faintest changes in the sky, would be the first to see it. A quiet call would go down to the lower decks, and soon figures would emerge, wrapped in their heavy furs, their faces turned upwards. The faint glow begins to coalesce, to take on form and structure. It brightens, solidifies, and rises into the sky, forming a great, silent, shimmering curtain of pale, phosphorescent green light. It is not a static image. It is alive. It moves. The curtain slowly and gracefully twists and unfurls, its edges rippling as if blown by a celestial wind that makes no sound. The scale is almost impossible for the mind to comprehend. The shimmering curtain might stretch from one horizon to the other, a luminous river flowing through the sea of stars. It might hang directly overhead, a great, silent, benevolent fire, bathing the entire icy landscape and the dark ships in its ethereal green light. The faces of the men watching would be illuminated, their features softened, their expressions a mixture of wonder and reverence. The colors are a marvel. The dominant color is a soft, luminous green, the color of ghostly fire. But at its lower edges, where the phenomenon is most active, there might be fringes of a delicate rose pink, and in the highest, most tenuous parts of the curtain, a hint of a deep royal violet. Unlike a storm, the aurora is a spectacle of absolute silence. The great curtains of light sweep and dance across the heavens without a single sound, an experience that is both beautiful and deeply uncanny. For the sailors, so far from home, so deep in the darkness, the celestial theater must have felt like a divine message, a sign of some great and mysterious power at work in the universe. It was a profound reminder of the beauty that could exist in this harsh and empty world, a silent cosmic ballet performed just for them. They would watch for hours, the punishing cold forgotten, until the lights began to fade. The great curtains would grow thin, lose their form, and resolve back into a faint, directionless glow on the horizon, before finally winking out, returning the world to the simple, familiar darkness of the moon and the stars. The men would return to the warmth of their berths, their minds filled with the memory of the silent celestial fire. After months of unbroken darkness, a new kind of change begins. It is not a change that can be heard or felt, but one that is seen. In the middle of what the ship's bell calls the day, a faint, hopeful glow begins to appear on the southern horizon. At first, it is just subtle lessening of the darkness, a soft purple and rose-colored blush that lasts for less than an hour before fading. This is the first hint of the returning sun. The long night is ending. Day by day, this period of twilight grows longer. The glow on the horizon becomes brighter, more defined. The men's spirits, which have been conserved and protected through the long dark, begin to feel a new sense of optimism. The sun, their ancient, life-giving companion, has not forgotten them. And then one day in late January or early February, it happens. The men gather on the deck, their eyes fixed on the southern horizon. The glow intensifies, and then, for the first time in months, a tiny, brilliant, fiery sliver of the sun itself breaks the clean line of the horizon. It does not rise high into the sky. It seems to roll along the edge of the world for just a few precious minutes. A sliver of incandescent orange before sinking back out of sight, but it is enough. The first sunrise. Direct, warm sunlight has returned to their world. Its weak, horizontal light casts impossibly long, sharp blue shadows across the white plain of the ice. The familiar landscape is painted in a new and dramatic palette of brilliant orange and deep blue. A quiet, heartfelt cheer might erupt from the men on the deck. It is a moment of profound spiritual renewal. From that day forward, the change accelerates. Each day, the sun rises a little higher and stays in the sky for a few minutes longer. The brief period of daylight expands, slowly and surely reclaiming the world from the darkness. The work of the crew can now be done in natural light. The world, which for so long has been a landscape of muted grays and blues, is reinfused with color. The deep sapphire blue of the pressure ridges, the subtle browns and grays of the shoreline rocks, the dark, familiar colors of the ships themselves, all are revealed anew in the clear, sharp Arctic light. The health of the men improves. The returning sunlight on their faces is a physical tonic. The psychological weight of the endless darkness begins to lift, replaced by a new energy, a new hope for the coming of the great thaw that will release them from their icy prison. The days continue to lengthen until another, equally strange and wondrous phenomena occurs, the polar day. The sun rises higher and higher in the sky until, one day, it does not set at all. It simply circles the horizon in a great, lazy 24-hour arc. This is the midnight sun. The world is now a place of constant, unending, and shadowless light. The ship's bell still marks the naval time. The men still divide their existence into periods of work and sleep according to the familiar routine. But their bodies, attuned to the ancient rhythms of light and dark, are now adrift in a sea of perpetual daylight. To sleep, they must create an artificial darkness below decks. It is a new kind of timelessness, the opposite of the long night, but just as profound. The ships and their crew, having endured the absolute dark, are now bathed in the endless, silent, and watchful gaze of the Arctic sun. The endless day of the Arctic summer brings the great thaw. The vast solid plain of sea ice that has been the crew's entire world for nearly a year begins to groan, to crack, to break apart. The sound is immense, a geological scale shattering and grinding as the winter's prison dissolves back into a navigable sea. Channels of open, dark blue water appear. The ship's once inert buildings come alive again. The rudders are reshipped. The sails are unfurled. And after 19 months at Beechy Island, in the summer of 1846, the Erebus and the Terror are free. They sail south into the unexplored heart of the archipelago, their mission resumed. For a few short months, they are once again an expedition of discovery. They navigate the treacherous, ice-choked channels of Peel Sound and Franklin Strait, pushing ever deeper into the blank spaces on their charts, searching for the final, missing link in the Northwest Passage. The mood of the crew is one of renewed hope. The long, dark winter is behind them. They have proven they can survive it. Now, all that is left is to complete their mission and make the triumphant journey home. But the Arctic is a place of cruel and unpredictable rhythms. The summer of 1846 is a cold one. The thaw is weak, the season of open water desperately short. In September, far earlier than expected, the new winter begins to bite. The sea around them, off the coast of King William Island, begins to congeal once more. The slush, the pancake ice, the great solid flows. This time, it is different. This is not a planned, orderly wintering in a protected harbor. The ships are caught in the open, drifting pack ice, 1,000 moving pieces that can shift and crush with unimaginable force. There is no shore on which to build an observatory, no nearby land for hunting parties. They are simply trapped, adrift. Their fate is no longer in their own hands, but in the hands of the ice and the wind and the currents that move the pack. The routine, the great anchor of their lives, is reestablished. The ships are once again banked in snow. The canvas roofs are erected. The ship's bell begins again its steady, relentless marking of the hours in the new encroaching darkness. The scientific observations continue. The evening classes, the theatricals, the quiet reading in the library, all of these rituals are performed with the same unwavering discipline as before. But the feeling is different. The cheerful optimism of the first winter has been replaced by something quieter, more profound, a deep and abiding patience. They have done this before. They know how to survive the darkness. Now they must simply do it again. They are no longer explorers, pushing forward into the unknown. They are waiters. They are watchers. Their entire existence is now focused on one single, all-consuming hope, that the next summer, the summer of 1847, will be a warmer one, and that the ice that holds them now will, once again, release its grip. They settle in for their second long, dark winter, a quiet community of 129 men, locked in a small, floating bubble of civilization, waiting silently in the vast, frozen heart of the continent. As the second winter of entrapment began, and the brief, hopeful light of the Arctic summer faded once more, the world of the 129 men of the Franklin expedition shrank again to the dimensions of their 2 wooden ships. Their survival through the coming months of cold and darkness now depended entirely on the provisions that had been so carefully packed in England years before. Let us descend, with the ship's purser, down into the hold, into the larder of this floating world, to take a quiet and meticulous inventory of the resources that sustain them. The journey down the ladder is a journey into the coldest, darkest part of the ship. The air grows still and frigid, the temperature kept low by the surrounding ice to better preserve the food. The smell is thick and distinct, the dry, dusty scent of flour and biscuit, the sharp, salty tang of cured meat, the damp, earthy smell of the wooden barrels, and the cool, metallic scent of thousands of tin canisters. The lantern's light does not fill the space, but carves a small, moving circle of warm yellow light out of the immense, ordered darkness. The most prominent and impressive sight is the vast store of tin provisions. This was the pinnacle of Victorian food technology, the great hope of the expedition. Stacked in neat, geometric walls are over 8,000 tins of preserved foods, prepared by a contractor named Stephen Goldner. The tins are heavy, made of thick iron sheet and sealed with a heavy solder of lead. Their labels, hand-painted, speak not of grim survival rations, but of the comforts of an English dining table, transported to the end of the earth. There are tins of oxtail soup and vegetable soup, tins of stewed veal, mutton, and choice cuts of beef. There are even tinned vegetables, a crucial defense against the dreaded scurvy, carrots, peas, and potatoes, all preserved in gravy. Each tin was a sealed promise of a warm, familiar, and nutritious meal, a small victory of industrial science against the vast, barren wilderness outside. The purser, in his logbook, would make a careful note of each tin as it was brought up to the galley, his neat handwriting a testament to the order that governed even the slow process of consumption. Beyond the tins were the traditional stores, the bedrock of the Royal Navy larder for centuries. Great, heavy wooden barrels are stacked 3 high, each branded with the broad arrow of the Admiralty. Inside are massive quantities of salted beef and salted pork, the meat cured to the hardness of wood, a dense source of protein that would be soaked for hours to make it palatable. There are hundreds of sacks of flour, carefully protected from damp, from which the ship's baker would produce a daily ration of bread. And then there are the barrels of ship's biscuit or hardtack. These were simple, unleavened wafers of flour and water, baked 4 times until they were utterly devoid of moisture, making them almost impervious to decay. They were incredibly hard, and a sailor would have to soak his biscuit in his soup or tea to have any hope of eating it. It was not a delicacy, but it was a reliable, enduring source of sustenance, the very definition of naval endurance. And of all the provisions, none was more vital than the anti-scorbutics. The horrors of scurvy, the disease born of vitamin C deficiency, were well known. The expedition was equipped with thousands of pounds of lemon juice, preserved with a small amount of rum and stored in large glass bottles. Every man, every day, received his carefully measured ration. It was a strict, scientific, and essential ritual. The sharp, acidic taste of the lemon juice was the taste of health, a daily, tangible defense against a terrible, invisible enemy. The purser moves through this cold, silent, and precious space, his lantern casting long shadows. He is the guardian of the expedition's future. His logbook is the true measure of their remaining time. He counts the barrels, inspects the seals on the crates, makes his careful, meticulous notes. For now, the larder is full. The provisions are plentiful. The numbers in his ledger speak of security and self-sufficiency. The ship is a sealed, perfectly provisioned world, a fortress of preservation designed to outlast the longest winter. The only question hanging silently in the cold, still air of the hold is how many winters it will be called upon to endure. The second winter passes just as the first had. The sun vanishes, the world is plunged into darkness, and the men of the expedition endure. They perform their plays, they hold their classes, they take their scientific readings. The bell chimes, the watches change. The great, unwavering machinery of the Royal Navy routine continues to function with perfect, disciplined precision. Then the sun returns, the days lengthen, the light comes back to the frozen world, and the entire expedition, all 129 men, begins to wait. The summer of 1847 arrives. This is the moment they have been waiting for over a year. This is the thaw that must come, the thaw that will release them from the ice and allow them to complete their journey. But the thaw is weak. The Arctic summer is brief and cold. The great multi-year pack ice that has trapped them off the coast of King William Island does not break up. Vast, brilliant blue pools of meltwater form on the surface of the ice, giving the illusion of open sea. But underneath, the ice remains solid, a prison that refuses to unlock its gates. The routine continues, but its character has changed. It is no longer a tool to pass the time. It is now a desperate defense against despair. The primary activity on the ships becomes the act of watching. Men are posted in the crow's nest, a tiny perch high on the mainmast, for hours on end. They are wrapped in all the furs they own, their eyes protected from the glare of the ice by dark goggles. They do not scan the horizon for land or for other ships. They scan the ice itself. They are looking for any sign of weakness, any dark line that might signal a crack, any patch of water sky, the dark, watery reflection on the underside of low clouds that indicates open water beyond the horizon. But they see nothing, only the endless, unchanging, and terrible stillness of the ice. The hope that has sustained them for so long begins to fade, replaced by a grim, quiet endurance. And it is here, in this state of endless, hopeful, and hopeless waiting, that our own journey with them must come to a close. The historical records from this point are fragmentary, a few desperate relics found scattered across the ice years later. The most important of these is a single piece of paper, a standard naval form found in a stone cairn at Victory Point on King William Island. On it, 2 messages are written. The first, dated May of 1847, is full of the familiar confidence of the expedition. It states that the ships had wintered here and that all was well. But it is the second message, written in a different hand, in the margins of the same page, that tells the rest of the story. It is dated April 25th, 1848, nearly a full year later. It states that the ships, Erebus and Terror, had been deserted. It mentions that Sir John Franklin had died on June 11th, 1847. It states the number of survivors who, under the command of Captain Crozier, were now setting out on foot for a distant river on the mainland. It is a quiet, factual, and utterly heartbreaking message. We will not follow them on that desperate journey. Our meditation is not on their tragic end, but on their long, quiet wait. Let us leave them not on the ice-choked shores of King William Island, but back on their ships in that final suspended moment of stillness. Let us leave them in the endless silence, surrounded by the vast, white, and beautiful emptiness of the Arctic. The bell has been chimed for the last time. The logbook has been closed. The scientific instruments are now just cold brass and wood. The library of 1,000 books sits unread in the quiet darkness of the great cabin. The ships, which were once a bubble of warmth and order, are now just silent wooden ghosts, slowly being reclaimed by the ice and the snow. The only sound is the soft, dry hiss of the wind. The only motion is the slow, majestic dance of the aurora in the long night sky. We leave them there in that endless stillness, frozen in a single, quiet, and eternal moment of history. In the midst of the vast, white, and silent world of the Arctic, the men of the Franklin expedition carried with them another world, a sanctuary for the mind, bound in leather and cloth. The ship's libraries, particularly the officers' collection of over 1,200 volumes, were not a mere luxury. They were an essential tool of survival, a carefully curated arsenal against the psychological pressures of the long, dark winter. Let us, for a time, step into the quiet lamplit space of the great cabin and browse the shelves of this remarkable floating library. The collection was a perfect microcosm of a Victorian gentleman's library, designed to provide for every intellectual and emotional need. There was, of course, a vast selection of fiction. The latest novels by Charles Dickens, whose serialized works were the great popular entertainment of the age, were on board. Imagine a sailor, crowded on the lower mess deck, listening as a literate officer reads a chapter of Oliver Twist aloud. For a few precious hours, the crushing, empty silence of the ice would be replaced by the noisy, bustling, and fog-shrouded streets of the London they all remembered. The works of Sir Walter Scott would transport them to the romantic highlands of Scotland, and the sea stories of Captain Marryat would remind them of adventures in warmer, more forgiving oceans. These books were not just stories. They were portals, allowing the men to escape the confines of their ship and their predicament, and to walk, for a time, in other worlds. There was a comprehensive collection of travelogues and histories, particularly those concerning the Arctic itself. The published accounts of previous explorers like Sir William Parry and Sir John Ross were on board. These were not just tales of adventure. They were practical manuals, filled with the hard-won knowledge of the men who had come before them. They would have read of the methods other crews had used to survive the winter, of their encounters with the Inuit, of the signs of a coming thaw. In these pages, they would have found a sense of lineage, a comforting reminder that they were not the first to face this challenge, and that others had faced it and returned. The library was also a place of work. It was stocked with the latest scientific texts on geology, botany, magnetism, and astronomy. These were the reference books the officers would consult after a long day of taking readings, a way to contextualize their own small, meticulous observations within the grand unfolding story of scientific knowledge. And perhaps most importantly, there was a deep collection of religious and philosophical texts. Numerous copies of the Holy Bible and the Book of Common Prayer were among the most used volumes on the ship. For Captain Sir John Franklin, a man of devout Christian faith, these were not just books, but a direct connection to divine order in a chaotic world. The Sunday services held on the covered main deck, the familiar words of the prayers and psalms echoing in the cold, still air, were a profound source of comfort and spiritual sustenance for the entire crew. The physical act of reading itself was a quiet ritual. Imagine a man finding a secluded corner, the ship groaning gently around him and opening a book. The faint, dry smell of the paper and the leather binding. The soft rustle of a turning page, a tiny human sound in the great silence. His face, illuminated by the low, steady light of a whale oil lamp, his mind 1,000 miles and 100 years away. In this small, simple act, the library fulfilled its most vital purpose. It was a silent, steadfast companion, a catalog of comfort, and a quiet but powerful affirmation that even in the most remote and desolate place on earth, the vast, warm, and varied world of the human spirit could still be found. In the world of the ship, there were two sources of time. The first was the ship's bell, which governed the daily human routine of the crew. But there was another, more sacred, more vital timepiece on board, kept not on the open deck, but protected in the captain's cabin. This was the marine chronometer, and it did not tell the time of the ship. It told the time of home. This object, a small, intricate machine of brass, steel, and glass, was one of the most important pieces of technology on the entire expedition. It was the key to knowing their position on the globe. While latitude could be found from the sun and stars, longitude, the east-west position, required knowing the precise time back home at the Greenwich Meridian in London. The chronometer was a supremely accurate clock, designed to keep that time perfectly, despite the violent motions of a ship and the drastic changes in temperature. Let us look at it closely. It sits within a polished brass bowl, which is itself suspended in a set of concentric brass rings called gimbals. This clever device ensures that no matter how the ship pitches and rolls, the chronometer itself remains perfectly, serenely level with the horizon. The delicate mechanism within is thus protected from the chaos of the sea. Its face is a study in clarity and precision. The enamel is a stark, clean white. The Roman numerals are fine and perfectly legible. The delicate, blued steel hands move with an unwavering astronomical accuracy. To look at it is to look at a small island of perfect, rational order. The most important ritual associated with the chronometer was its daily winding. At the exact same time every morning, a designated officer, often the captain himself, would perform this crucial task. He would unlock the protective wooden box, open the lid, and using a special key, give the mechanism its precise required number of turns. It was a moment of quiet, focused ritual, a daily communion with the scientific heart of the ship. The health and continued running of the chronometer was a matter of the highest priority. The expedition carried not one, but 24 of these precious instruments, their average reading providing the most accurate possible time. But beyond its vital navigational purpose, the chronometer served another more subtle and perhaps more profound role for the icebound crew. It was their connection to the world they had left behind. It was a tangible link to Greenwich, to London, to the idea of civilization. Its constant, quiet, and steady beat was the mechanical heartbeat of the ship. Imagine the soundscape of the polar night. Outside the hull, the sounds were alien and unpredictable. The deep, chaotic groan of the ice, the sudden Sharp crack of a forming fissure, the lonely howl of the wind. But inside the quiet of the great cabin, there was another sound. A constant, steady, and perfectly rational tick, tick, tick. It was the sound of human ingenuity, of scientific order, of time being measured and tamed. It was a quiet, insistent whisper that, no matter how lost they seemed in the vast, timeless emptiness of the Arctic, a part of them was still connected to the ordered, predictable, and familiar world of home. As long as the chronometer continued its steady beat, they were not truly lost. They were simply at a known, if remote, coordinate on the map, waiting patiently for the day they could use its quiet wisdom to navigate their way home. And so, our meditation on ice and silence comes to a close. We have walked the decks in the pre-dawn darkness, stood the long watch under the celestial fire of the aurora, and listened to the chiming of the bell in the endless night. We have witnessed the quiet routines, the scholarly pursuits, and the small comforts that created a floating world of unwavering order in a place of vast, timeless emptiness. We do not leave this story with answers to a great mystery, but with a feeling of profound stillness. It is a testament to the quiet, unassuming endurance of the human spirit, waiting with disciplined hope, forever locked in that final silent season on the ice. The ships are still. The ice is silent. The long watch is over. Let the great white silence of the Arctic fill your mind. Let the endless stillness be your peace. There's nothing left to watch. There's only the quiet and the deep, dreamless rest. Sleep well.